Millionaire got his black maid pregnant and denied her, until he saw the baby's eyes. The kitchen marble gleamed under crystal chandeliers, but nothing could shine away the darkness about to unfold. Naya Rodriguez stood at the center of Adrian Blackwood's pristine kitchen, her hands trembling as she clutched a manila envelope that would destroy everything. Adrian sat at his breakfast table, silver fork frozen halfway to his mouth. His wife, Celeste, continued buttering her toast, acting like the storm brewing around them didn't exist. But storms have a way of demanding attention. "You can't keep pretending I don't exist." Naya's voice cut through the morning silence like broken glass. Adrian's jaw tightened. The same man who commanded boardrooms with a single glance now couldn't meet the eyes of his own maid. "We've been through this. That baby isn't mine." The words hit Naya like physical blows. 6 months of carrying his child. 6 months of watching him build walls between them. 6 months of being treated like she was invisible. But today, she refused to disappear. "Look at me when you lie," she demanded, stepping closer to the table. Celeste finally looked up from her toast, ice blue eyes scanning Naya like she was an annoying stain on expensive fabric. "Adrian, handle your help. This is embarrassing." Your help. The phrase burned through Naya's chest. She'd scrubbed their floors, cooked their meals, organized their perfect lives. She'd given Adrian her heart during those stolen midnight moments when Celeste traveled for charity galas. And now she was just help. "My help." Adrian's voice carried a coldness Naya had never heard before. "She's delusional. Claims the baby is mine because we—" He stopped, glancing at his wife. "Because you what?" Celeste's tone sharpened like a blade. The silence stretched until Naya couldn't bear it anymore. Her fingers tightened around the envelope. Inside lay proof that would shatter Adrian's denials and expose his lies. "DNA doesn't lie," she whispered, sliding the envelope across the marble surface. Adrian stared at it like it might explode. His empire, built on reputation, respect, and carefully constructed lies, suddenly felt fragile as paper. "You wouldn't dare," he breathed. But Naya had already dared so much more. She dared to love him when she knew she shouldn't. Dared to trust him when every instinct screamed danger. Dared to believe his whispered promises in the dark. Celeste picked up the envelope with manicured fingers, studying it like expensive jewelry. Then she did something that shocked them both. She laughed. "Oh, darling." Celeste's voice dripped with amusement as she looked at her husband. "Did you really think I didn't know?" The kitchen went dead silent. Adrian's face drained of color. Naya felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "What?" Adrian's voice came out strangled. Celeste opened the envelope with surgical precision, pulling out the DNA results without even looking at them. "About your little midnight adventures? About how you couldn't keep your hands off the help? About how you got her pregnant and then acted like she was crazy?" She tossed the papers back onto the table. "I've known for months, Adrian. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" The chandelier above them seemed to sway slightly, or maybe that was just Naya's world tilting off its axis. She'd expected denial, anger, even violence. But this cold calculation from Celeste? This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Adrian's breakfast went forgotten as his carefully constructed world began to crumble. But this was only the beginning. Because sometimes the people we trust most are the ones planning our destruction. And sometimes a single baby can bring down an empire. 3 months earlier, Naya Rodriguez had stood outside the iron gates of the Blackwood mansion, rain soaking through her thin jacket as she clutched a crumpled job advertisement. Domestic staff needed. Discretion required. She should have paid attention to that last part. The mansion loomed like something from a movie, all Gothic peaks and shadowed windows. But Naya needed work, and the Blackwoods paid better than anyone else in the city. What she didn't expect was Adrian himself answering the door. Tall, dark-haired, with eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. At 35, Adrian Blackwood commanded every room he entered. His handshake lingered just a second too long, and Naya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You're not what I expected," he said, studying her face. "I'm qualified," she replied, lifting her chin. She'd worked for rich families before. She knew the rules: stay invisible, work hard, don't get involved. But some rules are made to be broken. The first week passed normally. Naya cleaned, cooked, and stayed out of sight when Celeste hosted her charity friends. She learned the house rhythms. Adrian left at 6 for morning runs. Celeste slept until 10, and evenings belonged to business calls and social events. It was during those quiet evening hours that everything changed. Naya was organizing Adrian's study when he found her there, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up from a long day. The storm outside had knocked out power to half the city, leaving them in candlelight. "You don't have to work in the dark," he said softly, lighting more candles. "I don't mind." Her voice came out breathier than intended. That's when she noticed him really looking at her. Not through her, like most wealthy people did with staff. At her. Like she was someone worth seeing. "What's your story, Naya?" No one had asked her that in years. The question caught her off guard, made her forget the professional distance she'd carefully maintained. "Not much of one," she said, continuing to dust his bookshelf. "Single mom, trying to make ends meet." "Where's your daughter's father?" The personal question should have been a red flag. Instead, it felt like he actually cared about her answer. "Gone," she said simply. "They usually are." Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Sympathy? Understanding? Or something more dangerous? As weeks passed, their conversations grew longer, more intimate. Adrian would find excuses to be in whatever room she was cleaning. He'd bring her coffee during late-night shifts. He'd ask about her dreams, her fears, her past. Naya told herself it was just loneliness. Rich man, cold marriage, looking for someone to actually listen. She could handle friendly conversation. But the way he looked at her wasn't friendly. The night everything changed came during the worst storm of the season. Celeste was in Paris for a gallery opening, and the mansion felt empty except for Adrian and Naya. Power flickered, rain hammered the windows, and thunder shook the walls. Naya was finishing up in the kitchen when lightning struck close enough to rattle the house. She jumped, dropping a crystal glass that shattered across the floor. "Are you hurt?" Adrian appeared instantly, concern flooding his voice. "I'm fine, just clumsy." She knelt to gather the pieces, but her hands were shaking. Adrian knelt beside her, catching her wrist gently. "Leave it. I'll clean it tomorrow." Their faces were inches apart, candlelight dancing between them. The air felt electric, charged with more than just the storm outside. "Naya," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. She should have pulled away, should have remembered her place, the rules, the inevitable heartbreak waiting for women like her who dared to love men like him. Instead, she let him kiss her. The glass stayed broken on the floor as they crossed a line that would change everything. But in that moment, with thunder masking their whispers and rain hiding their sins, Naya believed in fairy tales. She should have known that in real life, Cinderella doesn't always get her happy ending. 2 pink lines changed everything. Naya stared at the pregnancy test in the staff bathroom, hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped it. The cheap plastic felt heavier than the world itself. Outside, she could hear the mansion coming alive, Adrian's morning shower running, celestials clicking across marble floors, life continuing like her entire universe hadn't just shifted. She was pregnant, with Adrian Blackwood's child, the man who'd whispered promises in the dark, who'd made her believe she was more than just hired help. The same man who now barely acknowledged her existence when his wife was around. What have I done? For 3 weeks, she'd blamed her exhaustion on working double shifts. The nausea? Stress from hiding their secret. But deep down, her body had been trying to tell her what her mind refused to accept. She was carrying the baby of a man who belonged to someone else. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Naya quickly buried the test deep in the trash, splashed cold water on her face, and tried to look normal. But normal felt like a costume that no longer fit. The morning stretched endlessly. Every task felt impossible. The smell of coffee made her sick, lifting heavy cleaning supplies left her dizzy, and Adrian's casual good morning, Naya, nearly broke her composure entirely. By afternoon, she couldn't wait anymore. She found him in his study, door half open, typing furiously on his laptop. The same hands that had traced her skin now clicked keys like she'd never existed. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside and closing the door. Adrian looked up, annoyance flashing across his features. "I'm in the middle of. I'm pregnant." The words fell between them like stones into deep water. Adrian's fingers froze above the keyboard. The color drained from his face. "What?" "You heard me." Naya's voice was steadier than she felt. "I'm pregnant and it's yours." Adrian stood slowly, like a man facing execution. He walked to the window, staring out at the perfectly manicured gardens. The silence stretched until Naya thought she might scream. "That child cannot be mine," he finally said, not turning around. The words hit her like a physical blow. "Excuse me. We were careful. And even if we weren't." He turned to face her, and the coldness in his eyes made her stomach lurch. "This isn't my problem." Not his problem. Months of stolen kisses, whispered confessions, promises that they'd figure things out together, erased with 5 words. "How can you say that?" Her voice cracked. "After everything." "After what?" His tone turned sharp. Businessman dealing with an inconvenience. "A few nights? Some fun between consenting adults? That doesn't make me responsible for your poor choices." Poor choices. Like loving him had been poor judgment. Like trusting him had been stupidity. "I could lose my job," Naya whispered. "My home. Everything." "Then you should have thought of that before." The cruelty of it knocked the breath from her lungs. This was the same man who'd held her during thunderstorms, who'd listened to her dreams, who'd made her believe she mattered. But rich men have 2 faces, one for public consumption, one for inconvenient truths. As days passed, Naya felt the mansion's atmosphere shift. Staff members who'd been friendly grew distant. Whispered conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Someone had been talking. Was it Adrian, preparing to discredit her? Or had someone overheard their confrontation? The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, pulled her aside after dinner service. "There are rumors," she said quietly, "about you and Mr. Blackwood. I'm trying to protect you. But protection only lasted so long in a house built on secrets." Naya's secret was growing, just like the life inside her. Soon, there would be no hiding the truth. And in a world where powerful men controlled the narrative, pregnant maids were easily disposable. The question wasn't if they'd try to destroy her. The question was whether she'd fight back. Celeste Blackwood wasn't stupid. Beautiful, cold, calculating, but never stupid. She noticed everything. The way Adrian avoided eye contact at breakfast. How he'd started working late more often. The subtle tension that crackled whenever Naya entered a room. Most wives might have confronted their husbands directly. But Celeste preferred a more surgical approach. It started with the little things. Naya's usual cleaning schedule mysteriously changed. She was moved to early morning shifts when Adrian was at the gym. Her responsibilities shifted away from the main house toward guest quarters and storage areas. "We're restructuring the staff duties," Mrs. Chun explained apologetically. Mrs. Blackwood's orders. Celeste began appearing wherever Naya worked, seemingly by accident. She'd stand in doorways, watching with those ice-blue eyes, saying nothing, just observing. The other staff felt the shift too. Conversations stopped when Naya walked by. The friendly afternoon chats disappeared. Even Maria, the cook who'd always been kind, started avoiding her gaze. Someone had planted seeds of suspicion, and they were growing fast. "I heard she thinks she's better than us," Naya overheard one housekeeper whisper, acting all secretive, like she's got some special privilege. The isolation was suffocating. Naya found herself eating alone, working in empty rooms, spending hours without speaking to another human being. The pregnancy symptoms were getting worse, morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made simple tasks feel impossible. But the worst part was Adrian's complete avoidance. He'd rearranged his entire routine to avoid crossing paths with her. Different breakfast times, altered work schedule, even using the back staircase to bypass areas where she might be cleaning. When they did accidentally meet in hallways, he'd look straight through her like she was invisible. Meanwhile, his business empire consumed his attention. Merger meetings, international calls, board presentations, anything to stay busy and avoid the growing problem in his own home. Naya watched him from windows sometimes, seeing him pace the gardens while talking on his phone, gesturing animatedly about deals and contracts. The same passion he'd once shown her now belonged entirely to profit margins and stock prices. Did any of those late-night conversations mean anything? Or had she just been entertainment between spreadsheets? The breaking point came during a staff meeting. Celeste had called everyone to the main dining room. Unusual, since she typically communicated through Mrs. Chun. "There have been some concerns brought to my attention," Celeste began, her voice carrying the authority of generations of wealth. "About loyalty, about discretion, about remembering one's place in this household." Her eyes swept the room, lingering on Naya longer than necessary. "We provide excellent compensation, comfortable living arrangements, and job security. In return, we expect absolute professionalism. No gossip. No overstepping boundaries. No complications." The word complications felt like a dagger aimed directly at Naya's heart. Those who understand these expectations will continue to thrive here. Those who don't. Celeste's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Well, there are always other opportunities elsewhere." After the meeting, Naya found herself alone in the kitchen, fighting back tears. The message couldn't have been clearer: conform or leave. But where could she go? 6 months pregnant, no savings, no family support. The job market didn't favor unwed mothers, especially ones without glowing references from previous employers. She was trapped, and everyone knew it. That evening, as she organized the pantry, another task designed to keep her isolated, Naya heard footsteps behind her. Thinking of running away? Celeste's voice cut through the silence. Naya turned slowly. Celeste stood in the doorway, perfectly composed as always, but something predatory gleamed in her eyes. "I'm working," Naya replied carefully. "Of course you are. Such a dedicated employee." The sarcasm was razor thin. "Tell me, Naya, do you really think you're the first?" The question hung in the air like poison gas. First what? First maid? First mistake? First woman stupid enough to believe Adrian Blackwood's lies? But before Naya could respond, Celeste was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the terrible realization that this was just the beginning. Loudspeaker CTA number 1. If you've been hooked to this point, it means this story is pulling your heart the same way it pulled mine. Don't just watch silently. Subscribe now, because the next chapter will shake everything you thought you knew. Enough was enough. Naya had spent 3 weeks being pushed around, isolated, and treated like she was invisible. But carrying Adrian's child changed something fundamental inside her. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was protecting their baby. And that baby deserved a father who acknowledged its existence. She found Adrian in the kitchen at 6 a.m., exactly where she knew he'd be. His morning routine was predictable: protein shake, financial news, 15 minutes of solitude before the house came alive. Today, that solitude belonged to her. "We need to talk," she announced, blocking the doorway so he couldn't escape. Adrian looked up from his phone, irritation flashing across his face. "I thought we'd already." "You thought wrong." Naya stepped closer, letting him see the determination in her eyes. I'm 4 months pregnant with your child. Hiding from me won't make that disappear. Keep your voice down, he hissed, glancing toward the staircase. Or what? You'll fire me? Destroy my reputation? Make me disappear? She laughed bitterly. Your wife is already working on that. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Guilt? Fear? She couldn't tell anymore. This is complicated. No, it's simple. Naya pulled out her phone, showing him a news app. Blackwood Industries stock hit record highs yesterday. Your merger with Hamilton Corp is front-page business news. You're about to become one of the youngest billionaires in the country. Adrian's jaw tightened. What's your point? My point is that you have everything to lose. And I have nothing left. Her voice grew stronger with each word. So here's what's going to happen. You acknowledge this baby, provide financial support, and stop pretending I don't exist. Or I go to every gossip blog, every financial reporter, every social media platform, and tell them exactly how Adrian Blackwood treats the women carrying his children. The color drained from Adrian's face. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Naya leaned against the counter, amazed by her own boldness. Your precious empire, your perfect reputation, your billion-dollar merger, all of it depends on public image. How do you think shareholders will react when they find out their golden boy got the help pregnant and abandoned her? You're threatening me? Adrian's voice turned dangerous, the businessman replaced by something rawer, angrier. I'm offering you a choice. But Naya's hands were shaking now, adrenaline and morning sickness making her feel dizzy. Do right by your child, or watch me burn your world down. Adrian stood slowly, his height suddenly intimidating in the small space. You think you can destroy me? I have lawyers, resources, connections you can't imagine. I could crush you without breaking a sweat. Maybe, Naya admitted. But scandal travels faster than lawyers these days. One viral video, one trending hashtag, and your perfect life becomes everyone's entertainment. They stared at each other across the kitchen island. Two people who'd once shared whispered secrets, now facing off like enemies. Besides, Naya added quietly, do you really want to be the kind of man who abandons his own child? Is that the legacy you want? For a moment, Adrian's mask slipped. She saw confusion, maybe even pain, flicker across his features. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway above. Both of them froze, listening as the sounds grew closer. Someone was coming downstairs. Adrian's face went white. If that's Celeste. But it was too late. The kitchen door swung open, and there stood Celeste herself, perfectly dressed despite the early hour, taking in the scene with calculating eyes. Well, she said softly, isn't this interesting? 3 weeks later, the Blackwood mansion transformed into something from a fairy tale. White roses cascaded from every surface. Crystal glasses caught the light like scattered diamonds, and the city's elite mingled on perfectly manicured lawns. Adrian and Celeste's engagement party was the social event of the season, and Naya was forced to serve champagne to the very people who would destroy her reputation without a second thought. More canapes for table 7, Mrs. Chun whispered, handing Naya another silver tray. And remember, invisible tonight. Mrs. Blackwood's orders. Invisible. Like her growing belly could be hidden forever under loose black uniforms. Like the father of her child wasn't currently accepting congratulations from senators and CEOs just 30 feet away. The irony was suffocating. Naya moved through the crowd like a ghost, refilling glasses and clearing plates, while conversations about million-dollar donations and vacation homes swirled around her. These people spent more on a single dinner than she made in 6 months. Such a perfect couple, she heard one woman gush. Adrian's business empire and Celeste's family connections. It's a match made in heaven. Heaven. If only they knew the truth. She caught glimpses of Adrian throughout the evening, always surrounded by admirers, always performing. The charming smile, the confident handshake, the way he pulled Celeste close for photographs. He looked like a man who'd never had a care in the world. Their eyes met once across the garden. For a split second, she saw something flicker in his expression. Guilt? Regret? But then a business associate claimed his attention, and the moment vanished. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Naya turned to find Celeste standing directly behind her, radiant in an off-white designer gown that probably cost more than a car. Up close, her smile was perfectly polished and completely terrifying. "Could you bring more champagne to the terrace?" Celeste's voice carried just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. The staff there seems overwhelmed. "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood." Naya kept her voice steady, professional. But as she turned to go, Celeste's hand caught her wrist, gentle to observers, but with fingernails that dug just deep enough to send a message. "Oh, and Naya?" Celeste's smile never wavered. "You're looking a bit fuller lately. Perhaps we should discuss adjusting your uniform size soon." The words hit like ice water. Celeste knew, had probably known all along. Naya started, but Celeste had already released her wrist and glided away, leaving her standing frozen among the party guests. Fuller. Not pregnant. Not carrying Adrian's child. Just fuller. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. Celeste had delivered a threat wrapped in concern, witnessed by a dozen society matrons who would remember nothing except a kind employer caring about her staff's comfort. As the evening wore on, Naya watched Adrian and Celeste dance on the outdoor pavilion, their movements perfectly synchronized for the cameras. He spun her expertly, dipped her dramatically, kissed her hand like a gentleman from another era. The crowd applauded. Photographers captured every angle. Social media lit up with hashtags about #PowerCouple and #GoalsAF. And through it all, the real father of Naya's child never once looked away. But tomorrow would come. Tomorrow, when the guests went home and the fairy tale ended, reality would still be waiting, along with a DNA test that could change everything. Some secrets hide in the most innocent places. Naya was cleaning Adrian's mother's old study, a room that hadn't been touched since Eleanor Blackwood's death 5 years ago. Dust particles danced in afternoon sunlight as she carefully wiped down the antique desk, when her cloth caught on a hidden drawer. The drawer slid open with a soft click, revealing a bundle of yellowed letters tied with faded ribbon. She should have closed it immediately, should have respected the privacy of the dead. But something about the careful way the letters were preserved made her curious. The first letter was addressed to Eleanor in shaky handwriting. "Mrs. Blackwood, please. I'm begging you to talk to your son. He promised me things, made me believe I mattered. Now that I'm pregnant, he acts like I don't exist. I know you're a mother. Surely you understand." Naya's hands trembled as she read the signature, Isabella Santos, 2018. Her heart raced as she opened the next letter, then another. 7 letters total, all from the same desperate woman, all pleading for Eleanor's help in getting Adrian to acknowledge his responsibilities. The final letter was different. "I lost the baby last week. Maybe it's better this way. At least my child won't grow up wondering why their father pretends they don't exist. Thank you for the money, but it doesn't heal what your son broke inside me. Some women aren't meant to be saved by rich men's guilt payments." Naya sank into Eleanor's chair, the letters scattered across the mahogany surface. Adrian had done this before. Not just once, but enough times that his mother kept a drawer full of evidence. But there was more. At the bottom of the drawer lay Eleanor's handwritten response, a draft letter never sent. "Isabella, I'm sorry for my son's behavior. Adrian learned from his father that women are disposable, that money can fix anything, that consequences are for poor people. I tried to raise him differently, but some patterns run deeper than motherhood can reach. Take the money and disappear. It's the only kindness I can offer." The words hit Naya like physical blows. Women are disposable. Money can fix anything. This wasn't just about her. This was Adrian's pattern, inherited like blue blood and cruelty. Eleanor had known exactly what kind of man her son was, had paid off his mistakes before, watched him destroy women, and move on without consequences. How many others had there been? How many women had stood in this same position, carrying his children, believing his lies, only to discover they were just another problem money could solve? Naya thought about Isabella Santos, wherever she was now. Had she ever recovered from losing both her baby and her faith in love? Did she still wake up some mornings thinking about what might have been? The worst part was realizing Eleanor had tried to warn them. The letters showed attempts to reach out, to convince these women to leave before Adrian could destroy them completely. But warning someone about a fire doesn't help when they're already burning. A noise in the hallway made Naya quickly bundle the letters back together. She slid the drawer closed, but kept one letter, Isabella's first one, full of hope and desperate love. Evidence. Proof that Adrian Blackwood had a history of using women and discarding them like broken toys. As she finished cleaning the study, Naya felt something shift inside her. She wasn't the first woman to love Adrian Blackwood and pay the price. But maybe, just maybe, she could be the last. History was repeating itself, but this time, the ending didn't have to be the same. The collapse happened during dinner service on a Tuesday evening. Naya was carrying a tray of crystal glasses when the room suddenly tilted. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and she felt herself falling in slow motion toward the marble floor. The crash of breaking crystal echoed through the mansion like gunshots. When she opened her eyes, 3 staff members were crouched around her, their faces creased with worry. Mrs. Chun was checking her pulse while Maria fanned her with a cloth napkin. "Don't move," Mrs. Chun said gently. "You hit your head pretty hard." But it wasn't the head injury that made Naya panic. It was the way her uniform had shifted during the fall, revealing the unmistakable curve of her belly that she'd been hiding for months. The silence in the room was deafening. "Oh my God," whispered Rosa, one of the younger housekeepers. "You're pregnant," Mrs. Chin finished quietly, her eyes sad but not surprised. "How far along?" 6 months, Naya admitted. There was no point lying anymore. The news spread through the mansion faster than wildfire. By the next morning, every staff member knew. By afternoon, the speculation had reached fever pitch. "I heard it's Mr. Blackwood's," someone whispered in the laundry room. "That explains why she's been acting so strange," another voice added. "Poor thing. She has no idea what she's gotten herself into." Naya tried to go about her duties normally, but everywhere she went, conversation stopped. Eyes followed her. Some staff members looked at her with pity, others with judgment, a few with genuine concern. But the worst reaction came from Adrian himself. She was organizing the library when he stormed in, his face twisted with fury. "Everyone's talking," he hissed, closing the door behind him. "The whole staff thinks you're carrying my child." "Because I am," Naya replied calmly, though her heart was racing. "I've already told them otherwise." Adrian's voice was ice cold. "I've made it clear that any staff member spreading gossip will be terminated immediately." The cruelty of it took her breath away. He was publicly humiliating her, calling her a liar, destroying what little dignity she had left. "So that's your plan?" Naya asked. "Deny everything and hope I just disappear?" "I'm protecting my reputation. And my marriage." "What about your child?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "There is no child. Not mine." But even as he said it, Naya could see something flickering behind his eyes. Doubt? Fear? She couldn't tell anymore. What she didn't know was that Celeste had been listening from the hallway, her phone in hand, recording every word. Later that evening, Celeste sat in her bedroom, playing back the audio recording. Adrian's voice denying paternity, Naya's desperate pleas, the raw emotion of 2 people whose secret was finally exposed. This was better than Christmas morning. She'd been planning to destroy Adrian's reputation for months, his affairs, his arrogance. his belief that he was untouchable. But she needed the right ammunition, the perfect scandal that would make him completely dependent on her family's money and connections. A pregnant maid claiming he was a father? It was exactly what she needed. Celeste smiled as she uploaded the audio to her private cloud storage. Soon, she'd have photos of the baby, DNA evidence, maybe even more recordings. And when the time was right, she'd use all of it to bring Adrian Blackwood to his knees. But first, she wanted to watch him squirm a little longer. Labor pains started during the worst storm of the year. Naya woke at 3 a.m. to lightning splitting the sky and contractions that stole her breath. Rain hammered the mansion's windows like angry fists, and thunder shook the walls as she doubled over in her small staff bedroom. This wasn't supposed to happen for another 2 weeks. But babies don't follow schedules, especially when their mothers are living under crushing stress. Mrs. Chun, Naya called weakly, but her voice was lost in the storm. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and she knew she was in serious trouble. She managed to crawl to her door, pounding on it until Mrs. Chun appeared in her robe. "The baby's coming," Naya gasped. The older woman took one look at her and sprang into action. "I'm calling an ambulance. Can you walk?" The ambulance took 20 minutes to navigate the storm-flooded streets. 20 minutes of Naya gripping Mrs. Chen's hand while contractions came faster and harder. "Should I call Mr. Blackwood?" Mrs. Chen asked as they waited. "No," Naya said through gritted teeth. He made his choice. But Mrs. Chen called anyway. The hospital was chaos, power flickering from the storm, emergency generators humming, staff rushing between rooms full of patients who couldn't get home. Naya was wheeled into a delivery room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. "How far apart are the contractions?" the doctor asked. 2 minutes, the nurse replied. "This baby's in a hurry." Hours blurred together. Pain, breathing exercises, ice chips that did nothing to cool the fire in her body. The storm raged outside while another storm raged within her. At 11:47 p.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway. Expensive shoes on linoleum. A voice she'd recognize anywhere. Adrian had come. He appeared in the doorway like a ghost, his hair soaked from rain, his perfect suit wrinkled and disheveled. For a moment, he just stood there, watching her labor with an expression she couldn't read. "You came," she whispered between contractions. Mrs. Chun said. He stopped, running a hand through his wet hair. "I don't know why I'm here." Neither did she. But something about seeing him broke open a part of her heart she tried to protect. "One more push," the doctor announced. "I can see the head." This was it. The moment that would change everything. Naya bore down with everything she had, screaming as her son entered the world in a rush of blood and tears and overwhelming relief. "It's a boy," the doctor said, lifting the tiny, perfect baby. But Naya wasn't looking at the doctor. She was watching Adrian's face as he saw his son for the first time. The baby's cry filled the room, strong, healthy, alive. The nurse cleaned him quickly, wrapped him in a soft blanket, and placed him in Naya's arms. That's when she saw them. The eyes. Gray eyes. Not brown like hers, not blue like so many newborns. Gray like storm clouds, like steel, like Adrian's father and grandfather before him. The Blackwood family trait that couldn't be denied, couldn't be explained away, couldn't be hidden behind lawyers and lies. Adrian stepped closer to the bed, his face white as hospital sheets. He stared at his son like he was seeing a miracle and a nightmare at the same time. "He has her eyes," Naya said softly. Adrian's composure cracked. She watched years of control and arrogance crumble as he looked at the tiny face that mirrored his own. "My God," he whispered. "What have I done?" The baby opened those impossible gray eyes and looked directly at his father. In that moment, something shifted in Adrian's expression. Pain, recognition, maybe even love breaking through the walls he'd built around his heart. For the first time in months, Naya saw the man she'd fallen for. Vulnerable, real, human. But then his phone buzzed. A text message that made his face go rigid. Congratulations on your son. I have photos. We need to talk. See. Celeste had been here, had taken pictures, had evidence that would destroy everything Adrian had spent his life building. And somehow, Naya knew this was only the beginning. Those gray eyes changed everything. Adrian stood frozen beside the hospital bed, staring at his son like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. The baby's eyes were identical to his own, the same shade, the same intensity, even the same way they seemed to see straight through pretense. There was no denying it now. No DNA test needed. No lawyers required. This child was his. He's beautiful, Adrian whispered, his voice cracking. Naya adjusted the baby in her arms, exhausted but alert. She'd expected many things from this moment. Anger, denial, more cruel words. She hadn't expected Adrian to look broken. What's his name? Adrian asked. Santiago, Naya replied. After my grandfather. Santiago Blackwood. The name felt heavy with possibility and pain. Adrian reached out tentatively, then stopped. Can I? Naya hesitated, then shifted the baby toward him. Adrian's hands shook as he took his son, holding him like he might shatter. Santiago opened those devastating gray eyes and stared at his father with newborn wisdom. Adrian's breath caught, and Naya saw tears he was trying not to shed. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out. For everything. For denying you, for abandoning you, for being exactly the kind of man I swore I'd never become. But Naya had spent months preparing for this moment. Months of humiliation, isolation, and heartbreak had built walls around her heart that wouldn't crumble at the first sign of regret. Sorry doesn't pay for diapers, she said quietly. Sorry doesn't explain to a child why his father pretended he didn't exist. Adrian flinched like she'd slapped him. I know, but I want to make this right. I want to. What? Naya's voice grew stronger. Support us? Be a father? Play happy family while you're married to someone else. I'll leave Celeste, Adrian said desperately. I'll divorce her, acknowledge Santiago publicly, give you everything you need. For a moment, Naya almost believed him. Almost let herself imagine a world where Adrian chose them, where love conquered money and social expectations. Then she remembered Isabella Santos. The other women who'd received similar promises, similar desperation, similar lies wrapped in temporary guilt. I don't want your charity, she said firmly. I don't want your guilt money or your crisis conscience. And I sure don't want you to rescue me because you finally see what you've done. Adrian's face went pale. Then what do you want? I want you to be a real father to Santiago. Not when it's convenient, not when your guilt gets too heavy to carry. Every day, every decision, every moment that matters. I will. I swear. Your wife already knows, Naya interrupted. She's been planning something. Whatever game she's playing, Santiago and I are caught in the middle of it. Adrian's phone buzzed again. Another text from Celeste. Beautiful baby photos. The press will love them. Meet me at home. Now. His face went rigid as he read the message. She's been watching us. She's been watching you for months, Naya said. Do you really think she didn't know about us from the beginning? About Isabella? About all the others? Adrian's silence confirmed what she'd suspected. Celeste had known everything, planned everything, orchestrated this entire disaster. She wants to destroy me, he said finally. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you gave her so much ammunition. Santiago stirred in Adrian's arms, making soft baby sounds that seemed to echo through the sterile hospital room. For a moment, all three of them existed in a bubble of possibility, a family that could have been, should have been, might still be. But bubbles burst easily. Adrian's phone rang. Celeste's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, Naya said. But remember, whatever she threatens, whatever she promises, whatever game she wants to play, Santiago comes first. Not your reputation, not your money, not your empire. Your son. Adrian looked at her with something like respect. When did you become so strong? When I realized no one else was going to fight for my child. Loudspeaker CTA number 2. Look at how one child's eyes can silence the pride of a billionaire. If you're feeling that same chill, don't scroll away. Subscribe, so you never miss these powerful stories that mirror real life. The headlines exploded across every gossip site, tabloid, and social media platform like digital wildfire. Millionaire father denies child. Blackwood empire built on broken promises. The maid, the billionaire, and the baby he won't claim. Adrian stared at his laptop screen in his office, watching his reputation crumble in real time. The photos were everywhere. Him at the hospital, holding Santiago, looking every inch the guilty father. Celeste had captured the perfect shots. His face when he saw those gray eyes, the moment his world shifted, the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. Investors, board members, reporters, lawyers, everyone wanted answers he didn't have. The Hamilton Corp merger is off, his assistant announced, poking her head into his office. They're citing moral concerns and brand alignment issues. That merger was worth $3 billion. Without it, Blackwood Industries would struggle to stay competitive. Sir, his assistant continued nervously. Channel 7 is here. They want a statement about the baby. Adrian closed his laptop with more force than necessary. Tell them no comment. But no comment felt like guilt to the media machine that fed on scandal. By evening, the narrative had solidified. Adrian Blackwood, ruthless businessman, had gotten his maid pregnant and abandoned her. The internet had already decided he was guilty. The comments sections were brutal. Rich men think they can use women and throw them away. Disgusting. That poor woman. Imagine carrying his child while he pretends you don't exist. Look at those gray eyes in the baby photos. DNA test won't be necessary. But the worst part was what they were saying about Naya. The gossip blogs had painted her as a calculating gold digger who'd seduced her wealthy employer. Photos of her leaving the hospital were captioned with speculation about how much money she was demanding. Comment threads debated whether she'd planned the pregnancy to trap Adrian. She knew exactly what she was doing. Classic made-to-millionaire scheme. I bet she's already shopping for mansions with his money. Adrian read every cruel word, his stomach twisting with guilt. These people didn't know Naya, her quiet strength, her refusal to beg, the way she'd worked 2 jobs before coming to his mansion just to provide for her family. They saw a stereotype, not the woman who'd held his son with such fierce protection. His stock price dropped 12% in one day. The board called an emergency meeting. His biggest client canceled a $20 million contract. It's bad, his lawyer admitted over a tense dinner. The court of public opinion has already ruled. You need to control this narrative or lose everything you built. How? Adrian asked, though he dreaded the answer. Deny paternity publicly. Demand a DNA test. Paint her as unstable, opportunistic. Make this about a delusional employee, not about you abandoning your child. The strategy made Adrian's skin crawl. Destroy Naya to save himself. Exactly what Isabella Santos had probably faced, what all the other women had endured. I can't do that. Then you'll lose your company, the lawyer said bluntly. Investors don't fund men who can't control their personal scandals. The board will vote you out within weeks. That night, Adrian drove past Naya's apartment building. He saw her silhouette in the window, holding Santiago, probably reading him a bedtime story. The image should have been peaceful, but all Adrian could think about was the photographers probably camped outside her door. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? Isabella. Even his past was haunting him now. Another text, this one from his mother's old friend. Eleanor would be ashamed. She tried to warn you about this path. The media storm was just beginning. Tomorrow would bring more headlines, more speculation, more destruction of everything he'd worked to build. But somewhere in that storm was a baby with gray eyes who deserved better than a father who chose money over family. The question was, what kind of man did Adrian want to be when the dust settled? Adrian found Celeste in her walk-in closet, calmly packing designer clothes into Louis Vuitton suitcases like she was preparing for a vacation, not the destruction of their engagement. "You did this," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Celeste didn't look up from folding a silk blouse. "Did what, darling? Expose the truth? Show the world who you really are." "You leaked the photos, the hospital story, everything. Prove it." She smiled, continuing her meticulous packing. "Though I suppose it doesn't matter now. The damage is done." Adrian stepped closer, and for the first time in their relationship, Celeste looked slightly nervous. "Why? What did you gain from destroying me?" "Destroying you?" Celeste laughed, the sound sharp as breaking crystal. "Oh, Adrian, this isn't destruction. This is justice." She turned to face him fully, her ice blue eyes blazing with years of suppressed fury. "Did you think I didn't know? About Isabella? About the others before her? About every woman you used and discarded while I played the perfect fiancé?" Adrian's mouth went dry. "Celeste, I've known for years what kind of man you are. My father warned me, but I thought I could change you. Thought I could be enough to keep you faithful." Her voice turned bitter. How naive was I? She pulled out her phone, showing him a folder filled with photos, documents, recordings. Evidence of affairs dating back 3 years. "I've been documenting everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every woman whose heart you broke. I was going to use it after our wedding, when divorcing you would net me half of everything." "Then why now?" Adrian demanded. "Why blow it up before you could profit?" Celeste's composure cracked, revealing raw pain beneath her calculated exterior. "Because you fell in love with her." The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. With all the others, it was just sex. Meaningless affairs that meant nothing beyond your ego. But Naya, you look at her the way you never looked at me. You protect her, defend her, care about her opinion. Adrian started to deny it, but Celeste held up a hand. "I saw you at the hospital. The way you held that baby. The way you looked at her. You never looked at me like that in 3 years together. Our relationship was always business." "Exactly." Celeste's voice rose. "A business arrangement. Your money and status, my family's connections and reputation. But with her it was real. And I couldn't stand watching you give someone else what you never gave me." She resumed packing, her movements sharp with anger. "So I gave the story to the media. Let the world see the real Adrian Blackwood, the man who abandons pregnant women, who builds his empire on broken promises. You've destroyed my company. The Hamilton merger is dead. I'll lose everything." "Good." Celeste's smile was vicious. "Now you know how it feels to lose something you love." Adrian watched her pack the last of her things, realizing how completely he'd underestimated her. "What happens now?" "Now, you face the consequences of your choices." She snapped her suitcase closed. "My family is pulling all their investments from Blackwood Industries. The Davidson account, the Morrison deal, the entire East Coast portfolio, gone." The numbers hit Adrian like physical blows. Without Celeste's family money, his company would be crippled. "You can't." "I can and I will." Celeste headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Adrian, this is just the beginning. I have lawyers, connections, influence you can't imagine. If you think a little media scandal is bad, wait until you see what real power can do. Is this about revenge? Or protecting your reputation?" Celeste's laugh was cold as winter. "It's about making sure you finally pay for all the women you've hurt. Consider me their representative." She left him standing in the empty closet, surrounded by the ruins of his carefully constructed life. His phone buzzed. A text from his board chair. "Emergency meeting tomorrow. Prepare to defend your position as CEO." Without Celeste's family backing him, Adrian's empire was crumbling faster than he'd ever imagined possible. But maybe for the first time in his life, he was about to discover what really mattered. 3 weeks after the scandal broke, Adrian stood outside Naya's apartment building at 2 a.m., holding a bag of diapers and formula. The reporters had finally moved on to fresher scandals, but the damage was done. His company was hemorrhaging money, his reputation was in ruins, and the board was actively planning his removal. None of that mattered when Santiago was crying. "You came," Naya said, opening her door. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted and beautiful and completely overwhelmed. "You texted that he wouldn't stop crying," Adrian said, stepping into the tiny apartment that was smaller than his walk-in closet. The space was cramped but clean, filled with second-hand furniture and baby supplies that had clearly been purchased on a tight budget. It was nothing like the mansion, but it felt more like home than anywhere Adrian had ever lived. Santiago's cries filled the apartment, high and desperate. Adrian took him from Naya without hesitation, settling into the worn armchair she'd positioned by the window. "Hey, little man," he whispered, adjusting the baby against his chest. "What's wrong?" Something magical happened. Santiago's cries quieted to soft whimpers, then silence. His tiny hand curled around Adrian's finger, and those impossible gray eyes opened to study his father's face. "He likes you," Naya said softly, settling on the couch with a cup of tea. "He barely knows me," Adrian replied, but his voice was full of wonder. "Babies sense things. Trust, safety, love." She paused. "He knows you're his father." They sat in comfortable silence, Adrian rocking gently while Santiago dozed. Outside, the city hummed with late-night energy, but inside this small apartment, the world felt perfectly still. "I've been thinking," Adrian said eventually. "About what?" "About giving it up. All of it. The company, the money, the whole empire I built." Naya set down her teacup. "Why?" "Because none of it matters if I'm not the kind of father Santiago deserves. If I'm not the kind of man you—" He stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. "The kind of man I what?" "The kind of man you could trust. Maybe even love again." Naya was quiet for a long moment. "You can't just throw your life away to prove a point, Adrian. Santiago needs security, stability, not a father who gave up everything in a grand gesture." "Then what do I do?" "The board wants me out. Without Celeste's family money, I'll lose control of everything anyway." "You fight," she said simply. "You find another way. You prove that you can be both a successful businessman and a devoted father." Adrian looked down at Santiago, sleeping peacefully in his arms. "What if I can't? What if I'm too much like my father, too selfish, too?" "You're here," Naya interrupted, "at 2 a.m., holding your son, asking the right questions. Your father never would have done that." For the first time in weeks, Adrian felt something that might have been hope. Santiago stirred, making soft baby sounds. Those gray eyes opened again, focusing on Adrian with startling intensity. "I promise," Adrian whispered to his son. "I'm going to figure this out." The legal papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Naya stared at the documents with growing horror. "Petition for emergency custody" was printed across the top in formal legal font, followed by words that made her blood run cold. "Respondent is an unfit mother living in substandard conditions. Child would benefit from stable, financially secure environment. Petitioner can provide superior care and educational opportunities." Her hands shook as she reached the signature line, Adrian Blackwood. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. After weeks of late-night visits, of watching him bond with Santiago, of almost believing he'd changed, her phone rang. Adrian's name flashed on the screen. "Don't," she said the moment she answered. "Don't you dare try to explain this away. Naya, listen to me. You want to take my baby?" Her voice cracked with fury and pain. Our son isn't even 2 months old, and you're trying to steal him from me. It's not what you think. Then what is it? She was crying now, angry tears that made her vision blur. You decided I'm not good enough? That my tiny apartment isn't suitable for your precious heir? Celeste filed those papers, Adrian said desperately. She's using my legal team, my name, but I didn't authorize this. I'm trying to stop it. Naya's breath caught. What? She's claiming I gave her power of attorney to act in Santiago's best interests. Says I'm too emotionally compromised to make rational decisions about his welfare. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Celeste was weaponizing Adrian's own legal resources against both of them. Can she do that? She's trying. My lawyers are fighting it, but... Adrian's voice was strained. She has connections I can't match. Judges, politicians, child services directors. People who owe her family favors. Naya sank onto her couch, still holding the legal papers. Why? Why does she care about Santiago? She never wanted children. Because hurting him hurts me. And hurting you. Adrian paused. She knows exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. Through her tears, Naya read more of the petition. The language was clinical, devastating. Inadequate living conditions, questionable moral character, inability to provide appropriate care. They were painting her as everything society expected from an unwed mother. Unstable, unfit, unworthy. What happens now? She whispered. Now we fight, Adrian said firmly. Together. I won't let her take him from you. You promise? Because I can't go through losing Santiago and then losing you again. I promise. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'll protect both of you. But as Naya hung up the phone, she wondered if Adrian's promises were worth anything against Celeste's connections and unlimited resources. Santiago slept peacefully in his crib, unaware that powerful people were fighting over his future like he was a prize to be won. The custody battle was just beginning, and Naya had never felt more alone. The phone rang with a familiar, insistent tone of bad news. Adrian answered, his voice tight. Yes. Adrian, it's Robert. The board just voted. The Hamilton contract, it's been awarded to a competitor. The words were blunt, a bullet to the chest. Adrian's breath hitched. $3 billion. Gone. Just like that. But it was only the beginning. His phone buzzed with a text from a former client, a terse message. I'm sorry, Adrian, but we can't be associated with this. It's too much of a risk for our brand. The text was followed by a notification of a canceled contract worth $20 million. Then another, and another. His empire, which had seemed so solid just a week ago, was crumbling beneath his feet. He sat in the silence of his vast, empty office, the city lights outside twinkling like cruel, distant stars. Former allies, men he had made rich, now turned their backs. They saw a liability, not a friend. A former mentor, a man he had looked up to, sent a chilling text. Adrian, you've always put your ego first. Now you're paying the price. That night, Adrian drove past Naya's apartment building. He didn't go up. He just sat in his car, watching the light in her window. He saw her silhouette, holding Santiago, rocking him gently. The baby's cries were quiet now, a soft whimper. He looked at his reflection in the car window, a face he barely recognized. A man who had once been on top of the world was now losing everything. He thought of his son. He remembered those gray eyes in the hospital room, a mirror of his own. And for the first time, Adrian didn't see an asset, a problem, or a threat. He saw the face of a child. His child. Then, the true cost of his pride hit him. He had spent his life building an empire for a child he had yet to meet. He had climbed the corporate ladder, made millions, and built a legacy, all to prove to a woman who had taught him that money was the most important thing in the world. But now, as he watched his world fall apart, he realized that the only thing he had left was the one thing he had tried so hard to deny. His son. He had believed that money could buy anything: power, respect, happiness. But he had learned a brutal lesson. There were some things money could never buy. And in losing everything, Adrian was finally seeing what he was truly fighting for. The old, familiar scent of antique books and old paper filled Adrian's nostrils as he entered his mother's old study. It had been 5 years since she had died, and the room had been left untouched, a monument to a life he had never fully understood. He sat at her mahogany desk, a place he had been 1,000 times, and his hands, guided by an unseen force, reached for the hidden drawer. With a soft click, it slid open, revealing a bundle of letters. The same letters Naya had found. The letters from Isabella. He read them again, the words of a heartbroken woman who had loved a man who didn't know how to love back. He then found the note from his mother, her words a chilling prophecy. Isabella, I'm sorry for my son's behavior. Some patterns run deeper than motherhood can reach. He closed the drawer, a sickness in his stomach. He was his father's son, a man who broke women's hearts and then paid them to go away. But then his fingers brushed against something else, a small, legal-sized envelope, yellowed with age. It was a letter from his mother, addressed to her lawyer. It was her last will and testament. His heart pounded as he read it. The will stated that the vast majority of Adrian's inheritance, the real old money of his family, was not to be given to him directly. It was to be held in trust for his future child. My son, the will read, has a good heart, but he is lost. He believes that money and power are the only things that matter. But a man's true wealth is in his legacy, and a legacy is built on love, not on greed. The fortune can only be inherited if he raises his heir with dignity, regardless of class or race. He was stunned. His mother had known. She had known that the only way to save him from himself was to force him to be a father. He had believed that his inheritance was his, but it was not. It was his son's, and he was just the guardian. His empire was crumbling. The world was watching him, and now he knew the true cost of his pride. He had to choose. He had to accept his son, not just as a person, but as the heir to his family's fortune. He had to fight for the future of his child, not for his own reputation. The answer was clear. He had to get his son. He had to go to Naya and tell her the truth. The world was watching, but Adrian was finally seeing. He had to tell them the truth, and he had to do it for a new reason, not just to save his own soul, but to save his empire. The courtroom smelled of old paper and stale air. Naya sat with her lawyer, her hands trembling as she held a crying Santiago. Adrian had done what he said he would. He had gone public, but Celeste, with her back against the wall, was a cornered animal. She had filed a new motion, a cruel twist of the knife. She was petitioning the court to prove that Naya had manipulated Adrian from the very beginning. Celeste's lawyer, a cold, precise woman in a black suit, presented her evidence. Forged emails, fake text messages, and a falsified document showing Naya's grand plan to get Adrian's attention. Ms. Rodriguez is not a victim, Your Honor, the lawyer said. She's a master manipulator who saw an opportunity and took it. She saw a man emotionally vulnerable after his mother's death, and she took advantage of him. Adrian sat beside Naya, his face a mask of fury. He wanted to scream, to stand up and tell the world that Celeste was lying. But his lawyer had told him to stay silent. The case rested on Naya's testimony. Naya looked from the lawyer to Celeste, who sat at the other table, a flicker of cruel satisfaction in her eyes. She was winning. She was proving to the world that she had been right all along. Naya was on the verge of losing everything. She looked at her son's face, those gray eyes, and she felt a wave of fear so powerful it nearly knocked her over. Your Honor, the lawyer said, we have an unexpected witness. A woman who can speak to Mr. Blackwood's character. A hush fell over the courtroom as the doors opened and a woman, elegant and weary, walked in. It was Isabella Santos, the same woman from the letters, the same woman who had been paid to go away by Adrian's mother. She walked to the stand, her eyes fixed on Adrian's face, and Naya felt a flicker of hope. Isabella Santos took the stand, her voice clear and calm. "My name is Isabella Santos," she said, "and Adrian Blackwood is the father of a child I once carried." The courtroom erupted in gasps. The lawyers exchanged shocked glances. Celeste's face, once composed, crumpled into a mask of pure shock. Adrian's own face was a mix of shame and relief. He had been found out, but the truth was finally out there. Isabella spoke of their past, of Adrian's emotional distance, of his mother's desperation to hide his mistakes, of the money she received to disappear. "He wasn't a monster," she said, looking at Adrian with a flicker of forgiveness in her eyes. "He was a boy who never learned how to be a man. He thought money could fix everything, and he was too afraid to be anything else." She then turned to Naya, her eyes filled with a sad wisdom. "I chose to disappear. I chose the money. But you, Naya, you chose to fight. And you forced him to choose, too." Adrian rose from his seat, his lawyer's warnings be damned. He walked to the witness stand and looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I have one more thing to say." He spoke of the will, of his mother's final attempt to save him. He spoke of his pride, his denial, his cowardice. He admitted to everything, every cruel word, every lie, every moment he had run from his responsibilities. He spoke of his love for Santiago, a love that was not about money or power, but a love that was real. As he spoke, tears streamed down his face. The judge, a stoic woman who had seen it all, watched him, her eyes softening. She saw not a ruthless billionaire, but a man who was finally, truly, owning his mistakes. "I am not a good man yet," Adrian said, his voice raw with emotion. "But I am trying. I'm fighting for my son, not because of a will or a legal battle, but because he deserves a father who is worthy of his love." The courtroom was silent, save for the sound of Naya's quiet sobs. The judge, with a small nod, brought her gavel down. The case was dismissed. Adrian had won his son, not with money or power, but with the simple, brutal honesty of a man who had finally seen the truth. Loudspeaker CTA number 3. You've come this far with me, and if you're not yet subscribed, ask yourself, why watch without joining the family? Click subscribe now, because the ending is one you'll never forget. The next day, Adrian stood at a new podium, but this time, he wasn't alone. He held Santiago in his arms, the baby's tiny hand resting on his shoulder. Naya stood beside him, her gaze serene. The media had been given a new narrative, and they were devouring it. This was no longer a story of scandal, but one of redemption. "I have made more mistakes than I can count," Adrian said, his voice ringing with a newfound sincerity. "But my son, Santiago, has given me a chance to do something I never thought possible, to be a man worthy of his name." He then turned to Naya, a flash of pure respect in his eyes. "And Naya, she showed me what it meant to fight with dignity. She fought for our son when I was too proud to fight for myself." The reporters, once a snarling pack of wolves, now listened in respectful silence. They saw a man who had been humbled and a woman who had been a hero. The headlines shifted overnight, from Billionaire's child scandal to the Blackwood redemption. His stocks, which had plummeted, now began to rise. His allies, who had abandoned him, now returned. His empire, which had been on the verge of collapse, was now stronger than ever. But Adrian was no longer the same man. He walked away from the podium and looked at Naya. The flash of cameras, the buzzing of reporters, the sound of his name, none of it mattered. "Naya," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I have something to ask you. This isn't about charity. It isn't about guilt. It's about choice. I want to build a life with you. I want to be a father to our son, and I want to be a partner to you. I want to build a home, not a mansion, where we can be a family." Naya looked at him, and she saw not a broken man begging for a second chance, but a man who was finally whole. She had seen him at his worst, and she had seen him at his best. She had seen him as a boy who never knew how to be a man, and she had seen him become a man who was finally learning how to love. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw hope that was more valuable than any empire. The fight was over, and the real journey was about to begin. Months later, Adrian stood in the kitchen of a beautiful, modest home. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The room was not as grand as the one in the mansion, but it felt warmer, more alive. He was making coffee, and Naya was in the living room, reading a book to a giggling Santiago. Adrian smiled. This was it. This was the life he had always wanted, a life he had been too afraid to admit to himself. He walked into the living room and sat down beside Naya. He took Santiago from her arms and held him close. The boy looked up at him, those impossibly gray eyes, a mirror of his own, full of a kind of honesty that had saved him. "You know," Adrian said, his voice soft, "these eyes saved me." Naya looked at him, and she knew exactly what he meant. Those gray eyes had been a wake-up call, a painful, brutal truth that had forced him to face himself. They had stripped him of his pride, his money, his empire. They had left him with nothing but his soul. And, in losing everything, he had found himself. The door chimes on Adrian's phone rang with a notification. It was a news alert. He clicked it open, and his heart skipped a beat. A photo of Celeste, a grainy, distant shot. She was standing outside the family home, holding a suitcase, and her face was a mask of cold fury. The headline was short and to the point. Celeste Blackwood returns to New York after disgraced departure. The article was just a few short sentences, but Adrian knew its meaning. Her story wasn't over. She had lost the battle, but she was not done with the war. Adrian looked at Naya, and he saw a flicker of concern in her eyes. "She's back," she said quietly. Adrian did not reply. He looked at the photo, then at his son, sleeping peacefully in his arms. He knew Celeste would return, but he was no longer the man he had been. He was a father. He had a family, and he knew that no matter what came, he would be ready. He kissed the top of Santiago's head, and in those gray eyes, he saw the future. He saw a legacy that was no longer defined by money, but by a love that had been hard-won. He had lost everything to find himself, and in a way, he had won it all. The end of the story was not the end of the fight. But for now, Adrian, Naya, and Santiago were together, and that was all that mattered.